千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Daodejing by Lao Tzu. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now. To be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process of the Tao. So we know that Lao Tzu isn't teaching people how to cook, but how to live. And the other sage that followed this example using the same approach was Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi came after Lao Tzu, and he used that same idea, same notion. So one of the stories that he wrote, I have translated. The title of the story is The Chef Cuts the Ox. And there again, just like the Lao Tzu example, Zhuangzi was not trying to teach people how to cut the ox. He was, like the Lao Tzu, trying to teach people how to live. But we'll get to that in just a moment. For now, I would like to tell you the story about The Chef Cuts the Ox, written by Zhuangzi. Once upon a time, in ancient China, there was a man who worked as the chef for a duke. And one day, the duke happened to see the chef cutting up an ox in preparation for dinner. So this was a very mundane task. There was nothing special about cutting up an ox to prepare for dinner. And yet, there was something special about this particular chef that caught the duke's attention. The duke noticed that this chef was very confident as he went about the task of cutting up the ox. His movements were gentle. He touched the ox lightly. He leaned against it. Even the placement of his feet seemed practiced, like he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly where to go, where to put his feet. He moved in such a way that reminded the Duke of the choreographed movements of a dance. And he slashed his blade in and out of the ox. It was as if he was playing a musical instrument. And all along, everything was done as if it was to the rhythm of music. The Duke had never seen anything like it before. So he exclaimed, he said, "Excellent." He said the ancient Chinese version of bravo. Then he asked the chef, "How did you get to this skillful level? How are you doing this? Why is it that you are so advanced in doing this simple thing?" So the chef responded to him. The chef said, "Your Highness, what I follow is the Tao. It's not a skill per se. It's something that goes beyond a skill." And the chef said, "When I first started doing this, I was just looking at the ox just like everybody else. I looked at this animal. After 3 years of doing this butchering, I mastered this entire process, and I don't see the ox as an ox to be butchered anymore. I don't look at it with my eyes because I'm so well practiced. After several years, I use my mind to perceive this ox. So I reach out with the practice motions for many years, I use that experience to direct my mind, direct my hands. Now, this answer was not what the Duke was expecting. He was thinking that, well, maybe the chef will say, well, I've been practicing many years, so this is all old news to me. The Duke was not expecting a discussion about the Tao. So he was definitely intrigued. He said, that's interesting. Please go on. Please continue. So the chef explained further. The chef said, you see, I follow the natural flow. When you practice the Tao, when you follow the Tao, you follow nature. I let my knife slice right through the structure of the ox. I go from gaps between its bones, and I go from one to the next. The tendons and muscles come apart, almost without any effort on my part. Your Highness, you see, an average cook goes through one knife a month because it gets blunt after he hacks away at the ox. A good cook that is more skillful can go through one knife a year because he knows where to cut. He's more skillful. This knife that I'm using right here, I've been using it for 19 years. It has butchered thousands of oxen, but the blade, look, as sharp as ever. So then the Duke was curious. The Duke said, well, it's great to be slicing through the parts that are easy, but what about the joints? The bones come together in the animal in complex ways. How do you handle that? The chef says, well, Your Highness, the joints have openings. And if you look at how thin this blade is, the openings are large in comparison. So with the proper guidance, it can go right through those openings with room to spare. So that is the reason why my knife is still nice and sharp after 19 years. I do know that the joints can be quite complex, exactly as you say. So every time I come across these complex joints, I am cautious. I focus my attention, I slow down my movements. I identify the places where I need to navigate through the complexity to make the cut. And precision matters, and sometimes it only takes one small exact cut to cause the whole thing to fall apart. And the ox may not even know that it's dead as it hits the ground. So the Duke was impressed. The Duke said, well, I look at your work and you definitely seem to enjoy doing this. And the chef said, yes, Your Highness. When I am done, I survey what I have done, knowing that it was a job well done. So I put away my knife. I feel a profound sense of satisfaction that I cannot easily express. So the Duke said, excellent. The Duke smiled. He said, the words that I have just heard right now from you, Mr. Chef, they go well beyond cutting up the ox. Today, I have learned a priceless principle about living life. The end. So that is a story from Zhuangzi about the chef cuts the ox, and throughout the entire story, from the beginning to the end, it's not really about cutting the ox. It's all using that action, cutting the ox, to describe something else, and that's living life. So let's go ahead and do a similar analysis of the story as we did with cooking a small fish. So this slide compares the chef and life, the chef's work and living your life. So on the one hand, I've got the story, the chef cuts the ox. On the other, I have the Tao of Zhuangzi, And Zhuangzi is the one that wants to teach everyone, like the other sages. He wants to use these simple examples to teach the art of living. So the chef says that when the Duke saw the chef go about cutting the ox, the Duke noted that the chef was moving around as if following the rhythm of music, that the movements are so practiced and assured, it was almost like a dance, like pre-choreographed. So the chef definitely was doing his work with confidence, skill, and art. He was making that whole task like an artistic endeavor, a creative endeavor. What's that got to do with living your life? Well, here's what Zhuangzi would say. Here's what Zhuangzi intended to convey. If you can do art with butchering the axe, then what else can you not do with an artistic flair, with creativity? So the lesson here, and it's a very important lesson, is that no matter what it is that we have to do, any day of the week, you can infuse that work with your own creative flair, your own uniqueness. Absolutely everything that you do can be done that way. It can be done with effortless ease, practice assured confidence, and supreme satisfaction at the very end. But wait, before we get there, there's a lot more. The chef has spent years perfecting his art, perfecting his mastery. When he perfected those, he was able to look beyond the surface, doesn't really see the ox as an ox like he did at the very beginning. He's able to rely on his experience to guide his hands. In the same way, what Zhuangzi is trying to convey is that for all of us in life, remember the gradual accumulation of merit, of virtue? Same idea. Practice makes perfect. Practice a skill until it becomes second nature. That skill can be just living your life. And then the chef said, I follow the Tao, therefore I follow nature. And he moves his hands in accordance with the gaps that he sees that occur naturally. So he's able to slice through the gaps very easily without blunting his knife. This is a way to say that if you have the perception of the Tao, you look at what you have to do, and what you have to do is the ox, so to speak. It's quote unquote the ox that you have to cut apart. To identify the gaps in the structure of the ox is just another way to say that if you observe through the eyes of the Tao, you're going to be able to see the places where a small amount of effort, precise application of force can result in the maximum outcome. That is, you can achieve the most with the least, get the most done with the least amount of effort, the least amount of work. It seems magical to other people who don't follow the Tao, but the more you practice at doing this, the better you get at it, until it becomes almost intuitive. You can sense where to apply your effort, do your work in the right places, say the right words to the right people, nudge in the right direction to achieve the most effect. So that's the correspondence to following nature. There is a nature to everything, every task, every problem that we need to solve in life. To be able to see where you can slice through, that is a valuable skill. Okay, handle complexity. This is where the conversation turns to joints. So remember, the chef slows down for greater precision with complex joints. What that is saying is that we too encounter complex situations in life. complexity with many moving parts, you have to slow down. You have to be careful. You have to focus your attention in order to figure out what is the right places where to make the cut. What is the one thing that you can do to make the whole thing fall apart? Lastly, fulfillment. This is the lasting satisfaction that you feel when you do a great job. The chef felt great satisfaction to utilize his skills on behalf of the Duke in cooking the royal meal. That is just a way to say that when you do whatever it is that you have to do in life, a job well done gives you that well-deserved sense of accomplishment, of satisfaction. So you can see now we have looked at the story exactly the same way that we looked at cooking a small fish. We extracted the life lessons. So this is the method of the ancient sages. The more you are in tune with that, the more you can easily figure out what they try to say. When you are not in tune with this concept, with this correspondence between the metaphor and life, you'll find what they say to be extremely cryptic. With this understanding, everything is very easy. So now, to kind of go back to the story a little bit, just to wrap it up, I want to point out, let me just go ahead and bring up the bullets here. This is yet another basic example to explain life concepts. This should not be mistaken as Zhuangzi teaching people how to butcher. It is not saying that Zhuangzi enjoyed the taste of beef. No, that has nothing to do with it. So cooking a small fish, nothing to do with seafood. It's about life. Butchering the ox, nothing to do with beef. It's about life. So let's break it down. What are the life concepts? One of them is the reiteration from the chef talking about how he kept his knife very sharp. So he talked about how less experienced chefs will be able to use a knife for like a month or a year, and then after that, they go through that knife, they have to use another knife that's newer and sharper and so forth. So we know just by looking at that and then reflecting on our observations of life, our own lives and the lives of other people, we know that this is a great truth. We know that most people try to use the sort of the brute force approach to problems. People try to force their way through obstacles. That is just like the average cook hacking an ox. Most people using force to try to force their way through, they may eventually succeed, but at a great cost. The blades will be dull, blunted. The sharpness of the blade refers to your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. When that sharpness is blunted, it means your well-being suffers. Your ability to make more cuts, handle more problems, is going to go down. And this is why it's important to study the Tao, to maintain your sharpness so you can slice through with effortless ease. Then we also have intuition. This is where the chef talks about how he doesn't even see the ox anymore. This is similar to Western culture. A lot of times we use a meme like Luke, trust your feelings, use the force. Well, it's because in our culture, we tend to rely on the rational part of the brain a lot. Over-reliance on logic makes it so that we're ignoring a valuable and powerful tool that we have. If we can integrate our feelings, intuition with the rational parts, with logic, then we can become that much more powerful. So this especially requires that you practice. Most people, when they say they are listening to their feelings, are really listening to the words of fear rather than words of wisdom. You have to practice a lot to be able to distinguish between the two. Then your intuition, your feelings become much more trustworthy. Then the story also talks about the importance of focusing attention. So as we have already brought up, joints represent complicated problems in life. And you know, as well as I do, that there are complicated situations where you make one side happy in a contentious situation, the other side will be mad, and vice versa. Then you're going to say, well, I can't make everybody happy. I can make everybody equally unhappy. So you cannot solve a problem like that with a simple solution. And that is very similar to how the blade cannot separate a complex joint with a straight cut. With one clean cut, the joint comes apart. So it's not that easy. The only way to solve that complex problem is by focusing your attention to navigate through the complexity. You figure out exactly where you can apply yourself to do the most good with the least amount of effort. It's oftentimes a pivotal point, and the skillful leverage of whatever you can bring to bear produces the greatest impact. It may be something small that you do, but the dilemma will fall apart like the ox. And then lastly, create art. So this is just to reiterate the importance of artistic flair, creative uniqueness. Even if you don't think yourself as an artist, I would still say that indeed you are, and living your life well can be your beautiful masterpiece. So this sense of fulfillment that you feel when you complete a great work of art is what we're talking about here, living a great life. It's beyond temporary, transient happiness of acquiring something. And when you're done, you can put away your tools, like the chef putting away his knife, with a feeling of supreme satisfaction. Everything works out exactly the way it should. All is right with the world. So as the Duke said, this is a priceless principle for living life. And lastly, I want to bring everybody back to this right here, being the correspondence to ruling a large country is like cooking a small fish. And I'll come back to this again with practical examples to really make it concrete, make it something that's easy to apply in life. So this story, the chef cuts the axe, where does it come from? Well, you can find it in the book, The Tao of Happiness. This book is divided into multiple parts. You're going to find this story in part 3. It is the second story of part 3. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.